I never thought the worst betrayal of my life would come from my own daughter. But the truth hit me like a hammer. The day I sat in that lawyer's office, waiting for the will to be read, I was nervous, of course. My husband Robert had just passed away, and after 43 years of marriage, my world already felt empty. But I believed this moment would bring some comfort, some security. Robert was a careful man. I thought he would have made sure I was taken care of. I sat at the long wooden table, clutching a handkerchief, my heart heavy with grief. Victoria, my daughter, walked in wearing a sharp designer suit, her hair perfect, makeup flawless. She looked like she was walking into a business meeting, not her father's will reading. I tried to smile at her, but she wouldn't even meet my eyes. The lawyer cleared his throat and began reading. My pulse quickened with every word. To my beloved daughter Victoria, I leave the house, all its furnishings, and the majority of my financial assets. The words blurred together. My ears rang. I leaned forward in disbelief. Did I hear that right? Victoria's lips curved into a smirk as the lawyer continued, totaling $23 million in value. My breath caught in my chest. $23 million. To Victoria. I waited for my name. Surely Robert had set something aside for me, his wife of more than for decades. Surely he hadn't left me with nothing. The lawyer shuffled papers and added in a flat voice, and for Margaret, a monthly allowance of $200, to be provided by Victoria. $200. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. My stomach twisted. This had to be a mistake. I looked at Victoria, waiting for her to protest, to say she didn't need everything, to at least acknowledge me. But she leaned back in her chair, satisfied, already acting like the queen of the room. Looks like I'll be handling things from now on, Mother, she said smoothly, as if this was always the plan. The lawyer closed the folder. The meeting was over. Just like that. My life was no longer mine. I whispered, there must be a mistake. Robert would never. But Victoria cut me off, her voice sharp, dismissive. Don't make this harder than it already is. Dad trusted me to take care of everything. You've never been good with money. This is what's best. Her words stung like poison. What's best? For whom? When we left the office, she didn't take me home. She drove me to the house only long enough to gather a single suitcase. My house, my kitchen, my bedroom, every memory I had built with Robert. And she walked through it like it already belonged. To her dot in the living room, she reached into her purse and pulled out $200 in cash. She held it out like she was doing me a favor. Here, she said coldly. This should cover you for a little while. Maybe find a senior facility. Somewhere that can take care of you. You'll be more comfortable there. I stared at her hand, at the pitiful bills pinched between her fingers. My own daughter telling me to disappear. I whispered, Victoria, this is my home. Her expression hardened. Not anymore. She dropped the money onto the coffee table, turned her back, and began making phone calls, already speaking to contractors about renovations, talking about tearing down walls, changing the floors, replacing furniture. She was erasing me in real time. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. The home I had cooked in, cleaned in, prayed in, the home where I raised her, was gone. Finally, her husband Kevin walked in and gave me a thin smile, like he was watching something amusing. He motioned toward the door. I think it's time for you to go, Margaret. I wanted to scream. I wanted to claw the smug smile off their faces. But instead, I just went numb. My hands shook as I picked up the suitcase, still not believing this was happening. Each step toward the door felt heavier than the last. My body moved, but my spirit felt like it was crumbling. When the door closed behind me, I stood on the porch with nothing but a small bag and $200 in my pocket. It was quiet outside. The house looked the same from the street, standing, tall and proud. But for me, everything had changed. I had lost my husband. And now, in the cruelest twist of fate, I had lost my daughter too. That day, Victoria stopped being my child. She became a stranger, one who cared more about money and status than the woman who gave her life. As I walked down the street, dragging my suitcase behind me, I kept hearing her voice in my head. Find a senior facility. You'll be more comfortable there. The words cut deeper than any knife. I never imagined my own flesh and blood would turn me out into the world like I was nothing. But I would soon learn. She had no idea who she was really dealing with, because a mother's silence doesn't mean weakness. And sometimes the ones people throw away are the ones who rise the strongest. I dragged my suitcase down the street that night, the wheels scraping against the sidewalk, the sound echoing louder than my own heartbeat. It felt unreal. Hours earlier, I was a wife, a mother, the woman of that house. Now, I was just a burden to be thrown out. I checked into a small roadside motel. The kind of place with flickering neon lights and a front desk clerk who didn't bother to smile. The air smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. The carpet in my room was stained. The bed creaked when I sat down. This wasn't home, not even close. I sat there staring at the thin curtains, clutching those $200 Victoria had tossed at me, like scraps for a beggar. $200 from my own daughter, from the girl I had raised, fed, clothed, and carried through her hardest years. My chest ached as the memories poured in. I remembered her first day of school, how she clung to my hand and begged me not to leave. I remembered staying up all night when she had a fever, pressing cold towels against her forehead, whispering lullabies until her breathing calmed. I remembered working 2 part-time jobs so she could attend dance classes, so she wouldn't feel less than the other girls. And yet, here I was, invisible, disposable. The next morning, I walked to a nearby cafe. I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, just so I wouldn't be asked to leave. As I sipped a weak cup of coffee, I overheard a couple at the next table whispering, "That's her, isn't it? Margaret, Robert's widow. Didn't her daughter inherit everything?" "Yes. I heard she kicked her out." Can you imagine? After all those years? I bowed my head, shame washing over me like a storm. I felt stripped of my dignity. Not only had I lost my home, but now my humiliation was gossip for strangers. Later, I tried calling a few old friends, but when I explained what happened, their voices turned awkward, hesitant. Some offered hollow words like, "I'm sure she didn't mean it that way," or "It'll work out, just give her time." Others simply stopped answering my calls. It was as if my disgrace was contagious and no one wanted to catch it. By the third night at the motel, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying Victoria's words. "Find a senior facility. You'll be more comfortable there." Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't belong in the life I thought I'd built. But then, a small thought tugged at me. A detail from the will reading. The lawyer had paused before saying allowance, almost like he was holding something back. And when Victoria rushed me out of the office, he avoided my eyes. At the time, I was too shocked to notice. But now, lying in that cheap motel bed, the memory burned in my mind. Could there be something else? Something Victoria didn't want me to hear? For the first time in days, I felt something stir inside me. Not hope, not yet, but a spark of suspicion. I had spent my entire life trusting others, Robert to lead, Victoria to love, society to respect me. And what had it given me? Nothing. Now I realized, if I wanted answers, if I wanted justice, I couldn't sit quietly anymore. I picked up the motel phone, my hands trembling as I dialed the lawyer's office. When he answered, I said in a voice steadier than I felt, "Harrison, we need to talk. And this time, I want to hear everything." Because deep down I knew, this story wasn't finished. And maybe, just maybe, Victoria had made a mistake, big enough to change everything. The morning I walked back into Harrison's office, I felt like a ghost. My clothes were wrinkled from the motel, my eyes swollen from nights without sleep. But I carried something new with me, a spark of quiet determination. Harrison looked surprised when I appeared at his door. "Margaret," he said gently, standing to greet me. "I didn't expect you back so soon." "I need the truth," I told him, gripping my purse tightly. "All of it. Not the version Victoria wanted me to hear. The real will, my husband's real words." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Sit down." The smell of leather and polished wood filled the room. I sat in the same chair where my heart had been broken days earlier. But this time, I leaned forward, bracing myself. Harrison pulled out a different folder. Not the one Victoria had shoved under my nose, but one stamped updated 6 months prior. He opened it carefully. Robert made changes to his will not long before he passed. He was worried about Victoria's attitude toward money and how she treated you. My breath caught. He said that? Yes. He told me directly that he feared she would try to control you. So he added a clause, a very important one. Harrison read aloud, his voice steady. "To my daughter, Victoria Sullivan Hayes, I leave $10 million in trust conditional upon her respectful treatment of her mother after my death. Should she fail in this regard, the inheritance reverts entirely to Margaret." I stared at him, the words sinking in like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Conditional? He nodded. Yes. If she mistreated you, the money is yours. A shiver ran through me. That night at the house, when she tossed $200 in my face, when she ordered me to a senior facility, she had already broken the condition. Do you understand what this means? Harrison asked, leaning closer. I don't dare believe it. It means, he said firmly, that you, Margaret, are the rightful heir, not Victoria. You inherit $33 million. The house, the accounts, all of it. For a moment, I could only sit there frozen. Images flashed in my mind: Victoria smirking, her husband Kevin ushering me out of my own front door, the gossiping whispers at the cafe. All of it, overturned, in a single stroke. Tears burned my eyes, but this time they weren't from despair. They were from justice. I whispered. Robert knew. He knew what she was capable of. Yes, Harrison said softly. And he wanted to protect you. I covered my mouth with my hand, my chest shaking. After years of feeling unseen, unheard, my husband had finally seen me. He had left me a shield against my own child's greed. Harrison cleared his throat. There's more. Victoria presented you with forged papers. That's elder abuse, Margaret. Fraud. It's a crime. Fraud. The word rang in my head like a church bell. My daughter wasn't just selfish. She was a criminal. I sat back in the chair, dizzy with revelation. One part of me wanted to collapse with relief. Another part wanted to scream with rage. She thought she was clever, I muttered. She thought I'd just take the money and leave quietly. Most victims do, Harrison said. But you're not most victims. For the first time in weeks, I felt something powerful rise inside me. It wasn't just hope. It wasn't just anger. It was the faint taste of victory. I lifted my chin. What happens now? Harrison's lips curved into the smallest smile. Now, my dear, we begin. We call the banks. We freeze the accounts. And then he tapped the desk with his pen. We prepare for her to discover the shock of her life. The room suddenly felt warmer, brighter. My numbness was fading, replaced by clarity. Victoria had thrown me out of my own home. She had laughed as I carried my suitcase to the street. She had erased me without a second thought, but she had no idea that her cruelty had unlocked the one clause designed to destroy her scheme. And soon she would learn. The mother she had discarded was about to rise stronger than ever. The next morning, Harrison's office transformed into what he cheerfully called Command Central. I sat there in disbelief as phones rang, emails were sent, and officials were contacted. It felt surreal, like I was watching a crime drama on television, except this time, I was in the middle of it. Harrison leaned toward me, his glasses slipping slightly down his nose. First step: freeze every account your daughter thinks belongs to her. The moment she tries to spend your inheritance, she'll find herself holding nothing but air. I watched as he dialed the banks, his tone polite but firm. This is regarding the Sullivan estate. Yes. Urgent freeze order. Yes. Suspected fraud. With each call, I felt a strange thrill build inside me. Days earlier, I had been humiliated, powerless, cast aside. Now justice was spreading like wildfire across every system Victoria thought she controlled. Detective Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed woman with a calm authority, arrived soon after. She spread Victoria's so-called documents across the desk. These signatures are inconsistent. These seals are outdated. This isn't amateur work, it's professional forgery. My stomach twisted. So she didn't do this alone? Unlikely, the detective said. Someone with financial or legal knowledge helped. Possibly her husband. I thought of Kevin, with his slick smile and tailored suits. Yes, it fit. Don't worry, Rodriguez added. We'll get to the bottom of it. By noon, Harrison's office buzzed like a hive. A private investigator was digging into Kevin's business records. The banks had already flagged Victoria's credit cards. Even the house utilities, which she had arrogantly switched into her name, were suspended pending verification. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. I pictured Victoria standing in my kitchen, planning marble countertops and wine cellars, only to find her credit card declined at the store. I imagined her rage when she discovered the power she thought she owned was gone. It was a delicious image. At exactly 3:47 p.m., my phone rang. The screen lit up with her name. My hand trembled slightly as I pressed accept. Hello, Victoria. Her voice was sharp, almost panicked. Mom, there's some kind of mix-up. The accounts are frozen. The bank says they can't release the funds. What's going on? I let the silence hang for a beat before answering. I know exactly what's going on. Her breathing quickened. What do you mean? I steadied my voice, making it firm, but calm. I'm sitting in Harrison Fitzgerald's office. You remember him, your father's attorney, the one who read the real will. Silence. Then, a nervous laugh. Mom, I think you're confused. Someone's taking advantage of you. No. I cut her off. I discovered the truth. Robert wasn't blind. He saw your entitlement. He saw how you treated me. That's why he left a clause. Do you know what it says, Victoria? It says if you disrespected me after his death, every penny would revert to me. Her voice cracked. That's not possible. He wouldn't, he did. And by throwing me out, you handed me everything. 33 million. The house, the accounts, all of it. For the first time, I heard real fear in her silence. Finally, she whispered, Mom, we can fix this. We can meet. Talk this through. No, sweetheart, I said coldly. We'll meet soon enough. At the courthouse, her composure shattered. You wouldn't press charges against your own daughter. Something inside me hardened like steel. Watch me. And then I hung up. For a moment, the room was silent. Harrison smiled, proud. Detective Rodriguez nodded approvingly. I felt a wave of strength surge through me. The same woman who had once been invisible at family dinners, who was treated like a fragile relic, had just stood her ground against her own daughter and won. But the battle wasn't over. Hours later, Harrison received confirmation. Victoria's accounts were officially frozen. Kevin's business was under review. A subpoena had been filed for his financial records. The net was closing in. I pictured them at dinner that evening, maybe ordering champagne, celebrating their victory, when suddenly their cards would decline, their phones would buzz with bank alerts, their entire illusion crumbling in real time. It was almost poetic. That night, as I lay in the motel bed, I couldn't sleep. Not from despair this time, but from adrenaline. For the first time since Robert's death, I felt something powerful rise in me. Control. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice. Justice for the years I had been dismissed, for the nights I had been silenced, for the sacrifices that went unnoticed. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Victoria thought she had buried me, but in her greed, she had awakened something she never imagined. A mother with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Operation Justice had only just begun. It was early morning when I heard the knock at my door. 3 sharp, frantic raps. That rattled the frame. I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. For a second, I thought it might be housekeeping from the motel. But when I peeked through the window, my breath caught in my throat. Victoria. She stood on the porch, her perfect image in ruins. Her hair was unkempt, her designer dress wrinkled, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. I opened the door just enough to see her face. Mom, please, she whispered, her voice raw. We need to talk. I kept my hand on the frame, barring her entry. We talked already. You told me to find a senior facility. Remember? Her eyes brimmed with tears. I was wrong. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I'm still your daughter. Her words should have softened me. But instead, they sliced deeper. Because daughters don't betray their mothers. Daughters don't throw their own flesh and blood out like trash. You're only here because your plan failed, I said quietly. She shook her head violently, hair falling across her face. No, it's not like that. Mom, everything's collapsing. The banks, the accounts, they've all been frozen. Kevin's furious. The police are asking questions. I don't know what to do. I studied her carefully. For once, there was no smugness in her voice, no superiority, only fear. But then, like clockwork, she tried to manipulate me again. Think about the grandchildren, she pleaded. If this goes public, if Kevin is charged, their lives will be ruined. Please, for their sake, stop this before it goes too far. The audacity left me speechless. Even in the middle of her downfall, she used my love for family as a weapon against me. I closed the door slightly, but her hand shot out to hold it. Please, she begged, her voice breaking. Don't let this destroy us. For a moment, memories flashed in my mind. The little girl in pigtails running to me after school, the teenager who cried in my arms after her first heartbreak, the young woman I proudly watched walk across her graduation stage. But those memories felt like ghosts compared to the woman standing in front of me now. Victoria, I said softly, there's something your father wanted you to hear." Her head snapped up. "Daddy?" I pulled my phone from my pocket and pressed play. A familiar voice filled the air. Robert's voice, steady and calm, recorded 6 months before his death. "If you're hearing this, Victoria," he began, "it means my fears were justified. I prayed I was wrong, that my daughter had more integrity than I suspected. But if Margaret is playing this, it means you've proven me right in the worst possible way." Victoria's face drained of color. She stumbled back onto the porch steps, clutching her chest. "No," Robert's voice continued, unwavering. "I've watched your mother sacrifice her dreams, her ambitions, her very self to raise you. She gave you everything, while I built a business that kept me away too often. She deserves respect, dignity, and love. If you fail to give her those, then you fail as my daughter, and you will lose everything I intended for you." By the time the recording ended, Victoria was sobbing, not the delicate, camera-ready tears she used to manipulate others, but harsh, ugly sobs that tore through the morning air. "He hated me," she choked out. I knelt slightly, meeting her eyes. "No, Victoria. He loved you enough to hope you would prove him wrong. But you didn't. You proved him right." She shook her head desperately. "What happens now, Mom? Tell me what to do. Tell me how to fix this." I stood tall, feeling the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. "You can start by admitting what you did was wrong. Not a mistake, not misguided, wrong. And then you face the consequences." Her hands trembled. "The police, the courts, the humiliation, it'll destroy me. That's the price of choices." I said firmly. "You destroyed me when you threw me out. Now you face your own destruction." For the first time, I saw her truly broken, not the powerful, entitled woman she pretended to be, but the frightened child underneath, unable to charm her way out. "I deserved this, didn't I?" she whispered. I looked at her with steady eyes. "Yes, Victoria, you absolutely did." The silence between us was heavy. She wiped at her face, smearing the tears across her cheeks. Then slowly, she stood, her knees trembling. "Mom, I'll beg if I have to. Please don't let them take everything from me." I didn't answer. I simply closed the door, leaving her sobs echoing on the porch. Inside, my chest ached, but not from weakness anymore. From strength. For the first time, I wasn't the mother who bent, who yielded, who forgave too easily. I was the woman who finally demanded respect, even if it shattered the daughter I once loved. The news broke faster than I expected. By the second week, headlines were everywhere. Prominent banker and wife investigated for elder fraud. I sat in my motel room watching the evening broadcast, my hands trembling around the remote. There they were, Victoria and Kevin walking into a courthouse, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. "Mrs. Hayes, did you defraud your mother? Mr. Hayes, are you aware you could face federal charges?" Their faces, once smug and untouchable, now looked tight and pale. Kevin's jaw clenched as he shoved past the cameras. Victoria tried to cover her face with her hand, but the world saw her anyway. For decades, I had been invisible. Now my story was visible to everyone. T first. I didn't want the attention. I didn't want my humiliation to be dinner table gossip. But then, something shifted. I realized my silence had protected them all my life, and silence had cost me everything. Now, I was ready for the world to see the truth. That afternoon, a journalist from Channel 7 called me directly. "Mrs. Sullivan, would you be willing to share your side of the story? Other seniors could learn from your experience." I hesitated, staring at the phone. Part of me still wanted to crawl into the shadows, but another part, the stronger part, knew this was bigger than me now. "Yes," I said. "I'll tell my story." The fallout grew quickly. Kevin's firm distanced themselves. His clients pulled out of deals. Victoria's social circle, the same women who once fawned over her luxury handbags and curated lifestyle, suddenly vanished. But humiliation wasn't enough for them. They wanted out. That's when she came to my door. Eleanor Hayes, Kevin's mother. She arrived in a black luxury car, draped in diamonds, the air around her heavy with expensive perfume. When I opened the door, she gave me a thin smile, like royalty, lowering herself to speak to a servant. "Margaret," she said smoothly, stepping inside without invitation, "we need to resolve this situation." I watched her carefully. She carried herself with the same arrogance I'd seen in Victoria, entitlement polished over generations. "Your son and daughter committed crimes," I replied flatly. The situation is already resolving itself. She ignored the jab, seating herself on my sofa as though she owned it. Kevin may have made poor decisions, but surely you don't want this dragged through the courts. Think of the family. Think of the children. There it was again, that same manipulative script, weaponizing love and guilt. What are you suggesting? I asked, folding my arms. Her smile sharpened. A settlement. Kevin's family is prepared to compensate you. $2 million in exchange for dropping the charges against him. I blinked. $2 million. For an inheritance worth $33 million. For forgery, fraud, elder abuse. She tilted her head, voice syrupy. Be realistic, Margaret. You're 70 years old. Do you really want years of legal battles? Do you want the shame plastered across newspapers forever? Kevin has a career, children, a reputation to maintain. Sending him to prison serves no one. I lean forward, my voice low. It serves justice. For the first time, a crack appeared in her polished mask. She shifted uncomfortably. $5 million. Final offer. The amount was staggering. Once, I would have clung to it like a lifeline, but not now. Not after everything. I shook my head. Justice is not for sale. Not at $2 million. Not at $5 million. Not ever. Eleanor's smile vanished, replaced by ice. She stood, gathering her designer purse. You're making a grave mistake. Kevin's legal team has information about Robert, about his business dealings. It would be unfortunate if that became public during a trial. Her words hung in the air like a threat. I felt my stomach twist. Information about Robert? My husband, the man I trusted. The man who had written the clause that saved me. What kind of information? I asked carefully. She only smiled thinly. The kind that might change who the real criminal is in this story. And then she left, her heels clicking against the tile, leaving the scent of perfume and poison behind her. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the quiet walls. My pulse raced with anger, but also fear. What did they know about Robert? Could they twist his memory to protect themselves? I thought about Victoria, about Kevin, about Eleanor. They had built their whole lives on arrogance, manipulation, and greed. They would stop at nothing to save themselves. But then I thought about myself, about the woman I used to be, silent, submissive, erased, and about the woman I was becoming. And no matter what secrets surfaced, no matter what threats they whispered, one truth remained unshakable. I was not afraid anymore. They had taken everything from me. My home, my dignity, my peace. But they had given me something in return: clarity, strength, a fire I didn't know I had. If they wanted a war, then a war they would get, because I wasn't just fighting for money anymore. I was fighting for every invisible woman, every silenced mother, every discarded wife who had been told she was worth nothing. And this time, the reckoning wouldn't be private. This time, the whole world would see the pressure around Victoria and Kevin built like a storm. The more the investigators dug, the more lies surfaced. Their friends abandoned them, their cards kept failing, and every headline made them smaller, weaker. But they weren't ready to surrender. No, they had one last trick left. It happened on a rainy evening. I was sitting in my living room, the soft patter against the windows almost soothing, when the doorbell rang. Victoria and Kevin stood there, dressed like they were going to a business meeting. Kevin carried a sleek black briefcase, his expression calm but cold. Victoria's eyes were puffy, but her chin was lifted, like she was still clinging to control. "Mom," she said softly, "thank you for seeing us." I didn't invite them in, but they stepped inside anyway. Kevin set the briefcase on the table and opened it with a click. Inside were stacks of documents neatly organized, like contracts waiting for a signature. "Margaret," he began, his voice smooth, "we've spoken with lawyers. There's a way to fix this for everyone. You get to keep the house. You get $5 million in clean assets. In return, the fraud charges disappear, and this matter never sees another courtroom." I stared at him, my pulse pounding. Clean assets? That's an interesting phrase. Victoria reached across the table, her voice trembling. "Mom, please. This way. No one loses everything. We can move on. We can heal as a family." I studied her. Even now, even with everything crumbling, she was trying to make it sound like she was saving me. "What about the $33 million Robert left me?" I asked slowly. Kevin's jaw tightened. "That money is complicated, tainted. It can't be separated from Robert's business dealings. Trust me, Margaret, Taking 5 million is the best possible outcome for you. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes narrowing. And what do you to get out of this arrangement? Kevin's voice sharpened. We get to put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us. Victoria's charges vanish. My reputation stays intact. The family is spared from scandal, misunderstanding. The word made my stomach turn. They still refused to call it what it was: fraud, betrayal, theft. I tilted my head. Tell me something, Kevin. When did you discover Robert's business irregularities? Before or after you tried to steal my inheritance? He hesitated. That's not relevant. It's very relevant, I pressed. Because if you knew years ago, you're an accomplice. And if you only discovered it while committing your own crimes, then you're remarkably unlucky. Victoria's composure cracked. Mom, what are you getting at? I smiled faintly, for the first time feeling the upper hand completely. I'm getting at the fact that you two have been planning this for months, maybe years. The forged will, the financial games, even this little negotiation. None of it was an accident. Kevin slammed the briefcase shut. This conversation is over. Actually, I said calmly, it's just beginning. From the hallway, footsteps echoed. 2 federal agents stepped into the room, followed by Detective Rodriguez. Their presence filled the space with authority, the air electric with tension. Victoria Sullivan Hayes. Kevin Hayes, the lead agent, announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, and attempted extortion of a federal witness. The blood drained from Victoria's face. What? No, Mom, you wouldn't. I met her eyes, steady and cold. The same way you threw me out of my house, sweetheart. Except my way is legal. The agents moved swiftly, cuffing them both. Kevin sputtered, trying one last desperate play. Margaret? You don't understand. You're making enemies you don't even see. Robert's business had connections, dangerous ones. You've put yourself in real danger. The agent paused mid Miranda rights. Mr. Hayes, is that a threat to a federal witness? Kevin stammered. I'm just warning her. Good, the agent said flatly. We'll add witness intimidation to your charges. Victoria turned toward me as they led her out, tears streaking down her face. Mom, please, how could you do this to your own daughter? For a moment, I felt the ache of motherhood in my chest, the part of me that had once lived for her smile, her happiness. But then I remembered standing on that porch with a suitcase, the $200 tossed on the table, the words, find a senior facility. I met her gaze one last time. Because you already did it to me. And then she was gone, swallowed by flashing red and blue lights outside. When the house was quiet again, I sank into my chair. My hands shook, but not from fear, from release. For years I had been silenced, overlooked, erased. But tonight, I had watched the tables turn. The daughter who believed I was weak had just been taken away in handcuffs. And the mother she underestimated had delivered the final blow. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady, like a tide rising until it swallowed everything in its path. And I realized as the rain pattered gently outside that this wasn't just my victory. It was my rebirth. The first night back in my house felt unreal. I stood in the entryway, suitcase by my side, staring at the familiar walls that suddenly looked unfamiliar. Victoria's perfume still lingered faintly in the air. Her designer coats hung on the rack, her shoes scattered by the door, as if she still lived here. But she didn't. Not anymore. I walked slowly through the rooms, my fingers brushing the walls. For decades, this house had belonged to Robert, his choices, his style, his rules. Then, for a brief moment, Victoria had claimed it as her stage, already plotting her renovations. Now, for the first time in 43 years, it was mine. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. She had already replaced Robert's careful organization. With chaos, expensive makeup spilling across the dresser, clothes draped carelessly over chairs. I grabbed garbage bags and began stuffing everything inside. Every item I packed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The lipsticks she flaunted, the silk dresses she waved in my face, the shoes she had purchased with my money, bag after bag piled up at the door. By midnight, the room was stripped bare. I lay down in the bed, my bed, and closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I slept without fear of what tomorrow would bring. The days that followed were a blur of transformation. Contractors came and went, but this time, they weren't following Victoria's vision. They were following mine, Robert's. Study, which Victoria had planned to turn into a wine cellar, became something new, an art studio. The smell of paint and fresh canvas filled the air, replacing the scent of dust and neglect. I set up an easel by the window where the morning sun poured in. The first thing I painted was a single sunflower, tall and proud, its face lifted toward the light. The kitchen, which Victoria had wanted to gut and redesign in marble and chrome, I kept warm and welcoming. Wooden counters, bright curtains, a table big enough for anyone who wanted to sit and share a meal. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was finally becoming a home, a reflection of me. But it wasn't only the walls that were changing. I was changing too. Reporters called constantly, eager for my side of the story. At first, I hesitated. But then I realized my silence had allowed this to happen. Speaking up could protect others like me. So I told the truth about elder fraud, about betrayal, about the importance of not underestimating women who have been silenced for too long. The story spread far beyond our city. I received letters from strangers, other mothers, other widows, thanking me for having the courage they hadn't found yet. Somewhere between interviews, legal proceedings, and rebuilding my home, I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was leading. With part of my inheritance, I started the Margaret Sullivan Foundation, a charity dedicated to protecting seniors from financial abuse. We offered legal aid, education, and advocacy. The money Victoria had tried to steal was now being used to protect others from daughters and sons like her. The irony was almost a perfect. Of course, not everything healed. Victoria wrote me from prison 17 letters in total. I read the first few. They swung wildly between excuses, apologies, and pleas. I was under pressure. Kevin made me do it. Think of the grandchildren. But the truth was simple. She had chosen. And choices come with consequences. I stopped opening the letters after the fifth one, because some relationships can't be fixed with words. One afternoon, as I stood in my studio, sunlight streaming across the floor, I painted my most personal piece yet, a self-dash portrait. In it, I wasn't the broken widow who had been tossed aside. I wasn't the invisible wife who had spent her life living in the shadow of others. No, I painted myself standing tall, my face turned toward the light, eyes fierce, unafraid. A woman who had endured betrayal, survived humiliation, and emerged stronger. When I set the brush down, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. A few months later, Channel 7 asked me one final question for a televised interview. Mrs. Sullivan, do you feel guilty about what happened to your daughter? I thought about Victoria's face that day on the porch, streaked with mascara, her sobs echoing through the air. I thought about the police leading her away in handcuffs, shouting that I had destroyed her, and then I thought about myself standing in this home, free, strong, no longer afraid. I answered calmly, the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming everything they never thought you could be. That night, I walked into my garden, where I had planted fresh flowers in soil that now belonged entirely to me. The air was cool, the sky streaked with the last blush of sunset. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The quiet was powerful, stronger than screams, stronger than tears, stronger than all the chaos that had come before. Because in that quiet, I wasn't just a widow. I wasn't just a mother. I wasn't just a victim. I was Margaret Sullivan, and for the first time in my life, I was free.